My sister stole my fiancé 3 days before our wedding, so I gave her the wedding gift she'd never forget. I should have seen it coming. Maya had always been the golden child. Prettier, smarter, more charming. Growing up, she borrowed my clothes, my friends, and eventually my boyfriends. When I was 16, she convinced my crush Tommy Martinez to take her to prom instead of me by telling him I'd been talking about another guy. When I was 22, she moved in with my college boyfriend David while I was studying abroad in Italy, claiming she was helping him through depression after his father died. Each time, my parents defended her with the same tired excuses. Maya doesn't mean to hurt you, Mom would say, stroking my hair while I cried. She just has this magnetic personality. People are drawn to her. Your sister's not malicious, Dad would add. She's just young and doesn't think things through. But Maya always thought things through. I'd learned that the hard way when I found her diary at 15, full of detailed plans for stealing my friends, my opportunities, my life. She'd written about Tommy. Claire's so boring. I bet I could get him to notice me in one conversation. About David. He's too good for Claire anyway. She doesn't appreciate what she has. But I thought Jake Patterson was different. We'd been together for 4 years, engaged for 8 months. We'd met at a restaurant where I was waitressing to pay for nursing school, and he was working as a line cook with dreams bigger than his paycheck. Jake loved how I made him laugh during his worst kitchen disasters, scraping burned sauce off pans at 2 a.m. while he practiced new recipes. He loved how I supported his dreams of opening a restaurant, contributing my entire savings account, $23,000, to his business plan, when banks wouldn't give him a loan. He loved how I believed in him when his own family called him a failure for dropping out of college to attend culinary school. Jake had seen Maya manipulate men before. He'd been there during family dinners when she'd flirt shamelessly with my high school boyfriend Matt right in front of me, then claim she was just being friendly when I confronted her. He'd rolled his eyes at her wedding dress shopping commentary. Claire's so practical, but wouldn't something more form-fitting be better? You want Jake to be excited, not comfortable. He'd laughed when she'd accidentally spilled red wine on my engagement photos at last year's Christmas party, claiming the lighting made me look washed out and offering to retake them with her photographer friend. Your sister's exhausting, he'd told me after that party. I don't know how you put up with her constant drama. I'd defended Maya like always. She means well, she just doesn't have a filter. The rehearsal dinner was perfect. We'd rented the private dining room at Bella Vista, the restaurant where Jake and I had our first official date. 50 of our closest family and friends filled the space with laughter and champagne toasts. Jake squeezed my hand under the table while my father gave his speech about finding your person, about how proud he was to welcome Jake into our family, about how he'd watched Jake grow from a struggling cook into a man worthy of his daughter's love. Maya sat across from us, radiant in her sapphire bridesmaid dress that cost me $400, toasting our happiness with champagne and that smile I'd trusted my whole life. She'd insisted on sitting directly across from Jake, claiming it was the best spot for photos. Throughout dinner, she'd lean forward when Jake spoke, laugh just a little too loud at his jokes, touch his arm when making points about the wedding timeline. She's just excited for you, Jake had whispered when I noticed her behavior. Maya's always been dramatic. When it came time for the maid of honor speech, Maya stood with tears in her eyes, holding the microphone like she was addressing the United Nations. Claire has always been my role model, she'd said, her voice breaking with what seemed like genuine emotion. She's taught me about loyalty, about supporting the people you love no matter what. When Jake came into her life, I saw my sister transform into the happiest version of herself. Jake, you're getting someone who will fight for your dreams, who will stand by you through anything. Claire, you're getting someone who sees how incredible you are. She'd raised her glass with a trembling hand. To Claire and Jake, may you always choose each other first, no matter what challenges come your way. The room erupted in applause. Jake kissed my cheek, whispering, your sister really loves you. I'd felt guilty for ever doubting Maya's intentions. 2 nights later, I couldn't sleep. Wedding nerves, I thought. Our big day was in 18 hours. I'd already laid out my dress, a vintage-inspired A-line with hand-sewn pearls that my grandmother had worn in 1952. I'd confirmed the final head count with the caterer, 147 guests. Double-checked that the rings were safely tucked in Jake's best man's pocket, and made sure the photographer knew about the special shot of my parents' wedding rings next to ours. My phone was set with alarms every hour to remind me to drink water and eat something. At 5 a.m., I gave up on sleep and decided to surprise Jake with coffee at his apartment, our last morning as an unmarried couple. I'd picked up his favorite dark roast from the 24-hour diner and grabbed fresh bagels. My key turned in his lock like it had hundreds of times before, the same lock I'd helped him install when he'd moved into the 1-bedroom apartment above Mrs. Chen's flower shop. I found them in his bed, my sister, my fiancé, the white silk lingerie I'd bought for our honeymoon, $300 worth of delicate lace from the boutique Maya had recommended, tangled around her ankles. The engagement ring I'd watched him save for, working double shifts for 8 months, gleaming on the nightstand next to empty champagne glasses, and what looked like leftover takeout from Russo's, the Italian place where we'd celebrated our 6-month anniversary. Maya saw me first. Instead of shame or surprise, I saw triumph in her eyes. She'd been waiting for this moment, planning for it. I was going to tell you, she said, sitting up slowly, not bothering to cover herself. Jake realized he chose the wrong sister. Jake scrambled for his boxers, stammering apologies about it just happening, about being confused, about still loving me somehow. His face was red with shame and panic, sweat beading on his forehead as he tried to find words that could possibly explain what I was seeing. Claire, this isn't what it looks like, he said, the most cliché lie possible. But Maya cut him off with a laugh that chilled my blood, the same laugh she'd used when she'd told our parents I'd broken Mom's antique vase when we were 12. The laugh that meant she'd won again. Stop pretending you're sorry, Jake. We've been planning this for months. Tell her about the hotel room in Vegas when you went for that restaurant conference. Tell her about Christmas when you said my name in your sleep. Tell her about last week when you said you wished you'd met me first. My knees almost buckled. The Vegas conference was in March, 7 months ago. Christmas was at my parents' house where Maya had stayed in the guest room next to ours. Last week, when Jake had been distant and claiming work stress. Tell her about the loan, Maya continued, her voice getting stronger, more confident. Tell her how you're planning to use her savings to open a restaurant with me instead. The room spun. My $23,000. The money I'd saved working 60-hour weeks as a nursing assistant, picking up extra shifts during holidays, skipping meals to put away every possible dollar. The money that was supposed to fund our dream restaurant, Patterson's Place. Maya, stop, Jake said weakly, but she was on a roll now. Tell her about the apartment we looked at last week. The one with the big kitchen and the garden view. Tell her how we've been planning to leave right after the wedding, take her money, and start fresh in Portland. Portland. Jake had mentioned Portland recently, claiming a chef friend had offered him a job there. I'd encouraged him to consider it, thinking it might be good for us to start fresh somewhere new. Months. While I'd been ordering flowers and scheduling cake tastings, sending save the dates and choosing centerpieces, confirming RSVPs and finalizing seating charts, they'd been planning my humiliation. The late nights Jake claimed he was working at the restaurant, coming home smelling like perfume he said was from the female servers. The times Maya canceled our sisterly shopping trips because she had a date with someone she couldn't tell me about yet. The way they'd both been so helpful with wedding planning, insisting on handling the photographer and videographer themselves because they had connections who could save us money. We picked Chelsea Morrison, Maya had said about the photographer. She's incredible with candid shots. She'll capture every moment. Now I understood why. I walked out without a word. They were still calling my name as I descended the narrow stairs, Jake's voice breaking as he begged me to listen, Maya's sharp and demanding as she told him to let me go. Claire, please, Jake shouted from his window as I got in my car. Let me explain. I drove away slowly, watching him in my rearview mirror as he stood half naked in his window, probably realizing his life was about to implode. For the next 6 hours, I sat in my car at Sunset Beach, the place where Jake had proposed 13 months earlier. He'd planned an elaborate sunset picnic, complete with my favorite Thai food and a playlist of songs that meant something to our relationship. When he'd gotten down on one knee, he'd talked about building a life together, about how I was his best friend and his future all wrapped into one person. I can't imagine doing any of this without you, he'd said, his hands shaking as he opened the ring box. You make me better at everything. I should have been crying, calling my parents, canceling vendors. Instead, I felt something cold and calculating settle in my chest. Maya had taken everything from me since we were children, and each time I'd forgiven her because family was supposed to forgive. But this time was different. This wasn't a borrowed sweater or a stolen boyfriend. This was my future, my money, my life she'd planned to destroy. I drove home at 11 a.m. and found my parents in the kitchen, frantically calling vendors to cancel the wedding. Mom was sobbing over a conversation with the florist about losing the deposit. Dad looked 10 years older, his hair disheveled as he argued with the caterer about their cancellation policy. Sweetheart, Mom said when she saw me, her mascara streaked down her cheeks. Jake called. He explained about the confusion with Maya. He says it's just cold feet, that these things happen to couples before big commitments. Maybe you two can work it out if you just talk through it. Even now, they were taking his side. Maya was their precious baby who could do no wrong, and Jake was practically family after 4 years. I was just the wounded party who needed to be more understanding. There's no confusion, I said calmly, setting my purse on the counter. The wedding is still happening tomorrow, just not the way anyone expects. My parents exchanged worried glances. Dad cleared his throat. Honey, maybe you're in shock. This is a lot to process. Why don't you sit down and we can figure out how to move forward? I'm not in shock, I said, pouring myself a glass of water with steady hands. I'm thinking clearly for the first time in months. And I said the wedding is still happening. I locked myself in my childhood bedroom and got to work. First, I called my cousin Derek, who worked in tech security for a company that protected celebrities from stalkers and corporate espionage. Derek had always been my favorite relative, 3 years older, wickedly smart, and someone who'd never fallen for Maya's manipulation. When we were kids, he'd been the only one to call her out when she'd lie about breaking things or stealing money from our grandmother's purse. I need a favor, I said when he answered. Remember when you said I could ask for anything after I helped you through your divorce? Derek's ex-wife had tried to take him for everything, including his dog and his grandmother's wedding ring. I'd spent 3 months helping him document her affair and her attempts to hide assets. When the divorce was final, he'd gotten full custody of his dog and kept everything she'd tried to steal. Name it, he said immediately. I explained the situation, the affair, the money, the planned betrayal. Derek listened without interrupting, occasionally making disgusted sounds. Those pieces of shit, he said when I finished. What do you need? Derek had designed security systems for celebrity weddings, installed hidden cameras in offices for corporate investigations, and helped several friends gather evidence of cheating spouses. He understood discretion. More importantly, he understood revenge. I need to know everything, I said. How long this has been going on, what they've been planning, whether there are others involved. And I need it documented in a way that can't be questioned or denied. Give me Jake's address and phone number, Derek said. I can have micro cameras installed in his apartment within 2 hours. His phone can be cloned if I can get physical access for 30 seconds. How technical do you want to get? As technical as necessary. And Derek, I need this done legally. Everything has to be admissible if it comes to that. Leave that to me. Jake's apartment building doesn't have security cameras, right? And his lease probably includes standard language about management access for maintenance. I'll pose as a cable repair guy. Half the buildings in that neighborhood have been having internet issues this week. Next, I called Chelsea Morrison, the wedding photographer Maya had personally recommended. Chelsea specialized in candid moments and had an impressive portfolio of capturing authentic emotions at weddings. Her website featured testimonials from brides praising her ability to document the real story of their special day. Chelsea, this is Claire Richardson. You're photographing my wedding tomorrow. Oh my God, Claire, I'm so excited. Maya's told me so much about you. Are you having pre-wedding jitters? You sound a little stressed. Interesting. Maya had told her about me. Actually, I'm calling because there's been a change in plans. I have a very specific shot list for tomorrow, and I need to know you're willing to capture some unconventional moments. Of course. I pride myself on getting the shots other photographers miss. What did you have in mind? I need you to document everything that happens tomorrow. Everything. Even if it seems inappropriate or uncomfortable. Especially if it seems inappropriate or uncomfortable. Can you do that? There was a pause. Maya mentioned you might want some dramatic shots. She said you're really into authentic storytelling. I'm totally on board. Should I bring extra memory cards? So Maya had been planning this for a while, setting up her friend to document my humiliation. Perfect. Bring everything you have. And Chelsea, there might be some video components to tomorrow's event. Are you comfortable with live streaming? Absolutely. I do a lot of social media integration. Will this be going on Instagram stories or Facebook Live? Something like that. One more thing. I need you to keep this conversation between us. The surprise elements won't work if word gets out. Your secret's safe with me. Maya always said you were more creative than people give you credit for. After I hung up, I sat staring at my phone. Maya had been planning this humiliation for months, setting up her photographer friend to capture my breakdown. She'd probably imagined viral videos of me sobbing at the altar, content that would follow me forever. Then I made the hardest call of all. Mrs. Patterson? I said when Jake's mother answered on the second ring. It's Claire. I have something important to tell you about tomorrow's wedding. Jake's mother, Patricia, had never liked Maya. She called her that manipulative little peacock after Maya had flirted shamelessly with Jake's married brother at our engagement party, complete with hair flipping and inappropriate touching while his wife was in the bathroom. Mrs. Patterson was old-school Baptist with strong opinions about moral behavior and women who threw themselves at taken men. What's wrong, dear? She asked, immediately picking up on my tone. You sound upset. I told her everything. About finding them together. About the months of lies. About how they'd planned to humiliate me at my own wedding and steal my savings. About the apartment in Portland and the restaurant they wanted to open with my money. The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. I could hear her breathing, short and sharp, like she was trying to control herself. Those sinful children, she finally whispered, her voice shaking with rage. After everything you've done for that boy, after you supported him through culinary own save, after you when his own father called him a worthless. Jake's father had been particularly brutal during family dinners, constantly comparing Jake to his successful older brother who worked in finance. I'd spent countless evenings building Jake back up after his father tore him down. Mrs. Patterson, I have a plan, I said, but I need your help. Tell me what you need, sweetheart. That boy has been heading for a fall his whole life, and Maya's exactly the kind of woman who'll drag him straight to hell. Mrs. Patterson had been waiting 30 years to put someone like Maya in her place. She'd grown up in a small southern town, where women who stole other women's men were dealt with swiftly and publicly. She understood the value of a good, old-fashioned reckoning. I explained my plan. Mrs. Patterson listened, occasionally making approving sounds. You're sure this is legal? She asked when I finished. Derek's handling the technical aspects. Everything will be documented properly. And technically, I'm not doing anything except allowing the truth to come out at my own wedding. Good. Jake needs to learn that actions have consequences, and Maya needs to understand that not everyone will just roll over and let her take what she wants. There's one more thing, I said. I need you to make sure Jake shows up tomorrow. If he tries to run or cancel, this won't work. Oh, he'll be there, Mrs. Patterson said grimly. I'll make sure of it. That boy owes you an explanation in front of everyone who came to support your relationship. The least he can do is face the music. The morning of my wedding, I woke up at 6 a.m. feeling calmer than I had in months. My phone was already buzzing with messages. Bridesmaids asking about timing, vendors confirming details, relatives asking for directions to the church. Maya texted me at 6:15. Jake told me everything. I'm so sorry, sis. I never meant for this to happen. Can we talk before the ceremony? I need to explain. I stared at the message for a full minute. Even now, she was lying, planning to manipulate me one last time, probably hoping to convince me to quietly cancel everything and slink away while she and Jake rode off into the sunset with my money. I texted back, of course. See you at the church. We'll have plenty of time to talk. She had no idea I'd spent the night making sure every detail was perfect for her special day. Derek had sent me a text at 3 a.m. Package delivered. Everything's in place. You're going to love the bonus footage. Bonus footage meant he'd found more than I'd expected. Maya and Jake had probably been sloppy, thinking they were in the clear once the wedding was over. At 8 a.m., my hair and makeup team arrived. I'd kept the original appointments, telling them there had been some changes. but that we were proceeding as planned. Sarah, my makeup artist, noticed my calm demeanor. "You seem really zen for a bride," she said while applying my foundation. "Usually by now, brides are crying or yelling or both." "I'm exactly where I need to be," I said, which was the truth. At 10 a.m., I arrived at St. Mary's Catholic Church in my wedding dress. The guests were already arriving. 200 people who'd taken time off work, bought gifts, booked hotel rooms, and traveled from as far as California to celebrate what they thought was my happily ever after. I could see Jake's college roommates in the parking lot, laughing and adjusting their ties. My nursing school friends were clustered near the entrance, admiring the flower arrangements I'd spent months selecting. Maya waited in the bridal suite, wearing the sapphire bridesmaid dress that cost me $400. She looked nervous for the first time in her life, fidgeting with her hair and checking her reflection obsessively. When I walked in, she jumped up like she'd been caught doing something wrong. "Claire, I need to explain." "No explanation needed," I said, adjusting her hair with gentle hands. "You want Jake? You can have him." Her face lit up with relief and victory, the same expression she'd worn when she'd convinced our parents to let her have my bedroom when I left for college. "Really? You're not mad? How could I be mad?" I smiled serenely. "You're my sister. If you think Jake is your soulmate, who am I to stand in the way of true love?" Maya practically glowed. She'd gotten everything she wanted without consequences. Again. In her mind, I was the same pushover sister who'd always rolled over whenever she wanted something. "You're being so mature about this," she said, hugging me carefully to avoid messing up our makeup. "I was worried you'd make a scene." "Me? Make a scene?" I laughed. "When have I ever made a scene?" "Never," she said quickly. "You've always been so reasonable. That's why Jake and I knew you'd understand eventually. There's just one tiny change to the ceremony," I said casually, helping her touch up her lipstick. "Since you two are so in love, I thought you should be the one to walk down the aisle today." Maya's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" "I've arranged for you to marry Jake instead. Right now. In front of everyone." The color drained from her face. "Claire, we can't just—" "Why not? You love him. He loves you. Everyone's already here. The flowers are paid for, the cake is ready, the photographer is set up, and I've arranged for a very special documentation of your big moment." I could see her mind racing. This wasn't how she'd planned to steal my fiancé. She wanted to do it slowly, carefully, making herself look like the innocent victim who'd been swept away by unexpected love. She wanted to be the tragic heroine of a romance novel, not the homewrecker who stole her sister's wedding. "But what will you tell everyone?" she asked weakly. "The truth," I said simply. "That my sister and my fiancé found their soulmate in each other. That I'm stepping aside for true love. That everyone should witness the beginning of your beautiful life together." Maya knew she was trapped. If she refused, she'd look like the manipulative homewrecker she was. If she accepted, she'd be married to Jake before she could think through the consequences. And backing out now would require explaining to 200 guests why she couldn't marry the man she'd been having an affair with for months. "Where is Jake?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Getting ready in the men's suite. He's so excited to marry you, Maya. He kept talking about how you're everything he ever wanted in a woman." That was a lie. Jake had spent the morning texting me frantically, begging to talk, promising it was all a mistake. He'd called 17 times between 6 and 8 a.m. before I'd blocked his number. I'd forwarded all his messages to Maya instead, along with a note. "Your groom seems nervous. Maybe you should comfort him." 20 minutes later, Maya stood at the back of St. Mary's in a hastily altered wedding dress borrowed from our cousin Jennifer, who was conveniently the same size and had brought her dress for photos. The congregation murmured in confusion as Pastor Williams stepped to the microphone. "Due to unexpected circumstances," Pastor Williams said carefully, reading from the script I'd given him, "we're celebrating the union of Jake Patterson and Maya Richardson today, instead of Claire Richardson and Jake Patterson." The murmurs grew louder. I sat in the front row next to my parents, who looked mortified and confused. Dad kept whispering urgent questions that I answered with serene smiles and vague responses about love finding a way. Maya's smile was brittle as she walked down the aisle to Jake, who stood at the altar looking like he might vomit. He kept glancing at me desperately, probably hoping I'd stop this insanity. The organist played "Here Comes the Bride," while the congregation watched the strangest wedding ceremony they'd ever attended. Chelsea, the photographer, snapped away enthusiastically, just as I'd requested. She'd positioned herself perfectly to capture both Maya's forced smile and Jake's obvious distress. When Pastor Williams asked if anyone objected to the union, I could feel 200 pairs of eyes on me. The silence stretched for what felt like hours. I smiled serenely and gave a small, encouraging nod for the ceremony to continue. "Jake," Pastor Williams said, consulting his notes, "do you take Maya to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, for richer or poorer, in sickness and health, for as long as you both shall live?" Jake glanced at me one more time, his eyes pleading. I maintained my serene expression. He had no choice now. His mother was glaring at him from the second row. 200 guests were waiting for his answer. Maya was gripping his hands so tightly her knuckles were white. "I do," he croaked. "Maya, do you take Jake to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, for richer or poorer, in sickness and health, for as long as you both shall live?" Maya hesitated for just a moment, probably realizing that "for richer or poorer" might not work out the way she'd planned, but she lifted her chin defiantly, putting on the performance of her life. "I do. You may kiss the bride." The kiss was awkward and brief, more of a peck than a passionate embrace. Chelsea captured it all, along with the uncomfortable expressions of the wedding party and the confused murmurs of the guests. During the cocktail hour, I played the perfect gracious sister. I moved through the crowd explaining that love had simply found a different path, that I was thrilled to see my sister and Jake together, that sometimes the universe had different plans than we did. "You're handling this so well," said Mrs. Chen, Jake's elderly neighbor, who'd known him since he moved into the apartment above her flower shop. "Most women would be devastated. Maya and Jake belong together," I said with a serene smile. "I can see that now. Sometimes it takes a dramatic moment to reveal the truth." Jake's college friends looked bewildered but went along with it. Maya's sorority sisters seemed impressed by what they saw as a romantic twist worthy of a reality TV show. The older relatives whispered among themselves, clearly shocked but not wanting to cause a scene. Maya and Jake sat at the head table during dinner, looking increasingly uncomfortable as reality set in. They were married, to each other, with no prenup, in front of everyone they knew. Jake kept checking his phone, probably looking for an escape route that didn't exist. Maya maintained her brilliant smile, but I could see the panic growing in her eyes. The dinner was exactly what I'd planned for my wedding with Jake: salmon with lemon caper sauce, roasted vegetables, wild rice pilaf. The cake was still the 3-tier vanilla and raspberry creation I'd spent hours designing with the baker. Even the flowers were the same, white roses and baby's breath that I'd chosen because they reminded me of my grandmother's garden. Everything was perfect for Maya's special day. That's when I stood up to reveal my wedding gift. "Before we cut the cake," I announced, tapping my champagne glass with a silver knife, "I have a special surprise for the happy couple." The room quieted as the guests turned their attention to me. Maya and Jake looked confused but expectant, probably thinking I was about to give some tearful speech about stepping aside for true love. "As most of you know," I continued, "Maya and Jake's love story has been developing for quite some time. I thought it would be wonderful to share that journey with all of you." The lights dimmed and a large screen descended from the ceiling, the same screen we'd rented for a slideshow of childhood photos and romantic moments. Derek had positioned himself at a corner table, laptop open, ready to run the presentation. "Chelsea has done an amazing job documenting their relationship," I said, gesturing to the photographer who was still snapping away. "But today, I want to share some earlier footage that really captures the depth of their connection." The video began with Maya and Jake in bed together in his apartment, not from the night I caught them, but from 3 months earlier. Derek's hidden cameras had captured everything in crystal clear HD. The footage showed them laughing about how clueless I was, planning their strategy for breaking up with me after the wedding. "Claire's always been so trusting," Maya said in the video, stretched out naked on my fiancé's bed. "She has no idea we've been planning this since March." The room went dead silent. You could hear the collective intake of breath from 200 shocked guests. "Tell me again about the money," Jake said on screen, running his hands down Maya's body. $23,000. She's been saving for years. Once we're married and move to Portland, she'll never be able to touch it. We'll have enough to open the restaurant and disappear before she can do anything about it." The video continued. Months of planning. Jake practicing his breakup speech while Maya tried on my wedding dress in his apartment. Maya calculating how much money they'd save by keeping all the wedding vendors I'd already paid. Jake talking about how easy it would be to manipulate me into signing over power of attorney for the restaurant business. The most damning clip was from a week ago. Maya on the phone with someone saying, "Claire's always been pathetic. She'll probably beg Jake to take her back after the wedding, but we'll be long gone by then. She's too spineless to fight for anything." 200 guests watched in stunned silence as the truth played out on the screen in excruciating detail. Jake's mother stood up and walked out halfway through, her face twisted with disgust. My parents sat frozen in horror. Maya's sorority sisters were filming everything with their phones, probably already posting to social media. When the video ended, I stood up with the microphone, my expression calm and pleasant. "Surprise," I said brightly. I thought everyone should know what kind of love story they were celebrating today. The room erupted. Guests began standing and leaving, some throwing their napkins on their tables in disgust. Jake's groomsmen looked ready to fight him. Maya's face was buried in her hands as her new mother-in-law's friends filed past, muttering about moral decay and the downfall of family values. But I wasn't finished. "One more gift," I announced as the chaos swirled around us. Derek stood up from his corner table and nodded. Every phone in the room received the same text message simultaneously, a link to a private website where the full video was posted, along with screenshots of Jake and Maya's text messages planning my humiliation and their financial betrayal. "Just so everyone can remember this special day," I said sweetly. The website includes all the footage Derek collected over the past week, including some lovely conversations about how they plan to disappear to Portland with my life savings. "And Maya, sweetheart, you might want to check your social media. I've already tagged everyone we know." Maya looked at her phone and screamed. The video was spreading across Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok faster than she could delete notifications. Derek had made sure it would be impossible to remove. He'd uploaded it to multiple platforms simultaneously and sent it to every gossip blog and local news station in the city. "The hashtag is our sisterly love," I added helpfully. "Feel free to share your thoughts." Jake finally found his voice, his face red with humiliation and rage. "Claire, you're insane. We can get this marriage annulled." "Actually," I said, pulling out a folder thick with legal documents, "you can't. You're both over 18, mentally competent, and said 'I do' in front of 200 witnesses. In this state, consummation isn't required for a legal marriage, and there's no evidence of coercion." Derek helped me research the laws thoroughly. "Congratulations, you're stuck with each other. This is revenge porn," Maya shrieked, pointing at the screen where her naked image was still displayed. "I'll sue you." "Actually," Derek called out, standing up and addressing the room like he was giving a legal presentation. Everything was filmed in spaces where you had no expectation of privacy. Jake's apartment building lease specifically mentions security cameras in common areas due to recent break-ins. The building management company installed them legally after getting tenant consent. Jake signed the paperwork 3 months ago. Plus, the church ceremony was a public event that you both consented to have filmed. He held up official-looking documents. Everything is perfectly legal. I have the permits, the consent forms, and the legal opinions to prove it. Jake grabbed Maya's arm, his knuckles white with fury. We're leaving. Good idea, I said cheerfully. Your honeymoon suite at the Hilton is already paid for. Non-refundable, unfortunately. The penthouse package with champagne and rose petals. I thought you'd appreciate the irony. As they fled through the kitchen to avoid the angry guests and the photographers who'd started arriving after Derek's social media post went viral, I heard Maya screaming at Jake about ruining her life. This is all your fault, she shrieked. You said she was stupid. You said she'd never fight back. You're the one who wanted to steal her money, Jake yelled back. You said it would be easy. Their voices faded as they disappeared into the parking lot, leaving behind a room full of stunned guests, abandoned wedding gifts, and a 3-tier cake that would go untouched. The cleanup took 2 hours. Guests left in small groups, many stopping to apologize to me for not seeing through the deception sooner. Jake's college friends seemed particularly ashamed. They'd suspected something was off but hadn't said anything because they didn't want to get involved in relationship drama. We should have told you, said Mike, Jake's roommate from culinary school. Jake's been acting weird for months, canceling plans and lying about where he was going. We thought he was just stressed about the wedding. Mrs. Patterson was the last to leave. She hugged me tightly, tears in her eyes. I'm so proud of you for standing up for yourself, she said. That boy got exactly what he deserved. And Maya, well, she'll learn soon enough what kind of man she married. What do you mean? I asked. Jake's always been selfish and weak. The minute things get difficult, he runs. Maya thinks she won some great prize, but she'll discover she's married to a coward who will blame her for everything that goes wrong in their life. The next morning, I woke up in my childhood bedroom for the first time in months without anxiety crushing my chest. My phone had hundreds of messages, but not the kind I expected. Friends and extended family were reaching out with support. They'd always suspected Maya was manipulative, but had never seen proof. The video had revealed patterns they'd noticed but dismissed. The way she'd undermine other women, the way she'd flirt with taken men, the way she'd always positioned herself as the victim while creating drama. I always knew something was off about Maya, texted my college roommate Jessica. Remember when she tried to convince me you were talking bad about me behind my back? Now I know she was just trying to isolate you from your friends. Jake's restaurant investors were pulling out after seeing the video. $150,000 in promised funding gone overnight. Maya's employer, a conservative law firm that specialized in family values, had fired her for moral turpitude and behavior inconsistent with the firm's Christian principles. The best message came from Jake's brother David. Thank God you dodged that bullet. Jake's been a selfish jerk since we were kids, and Maya's perfect for him. 2 narcissists deserve each other. Mom's never been happier to be wrong about someone. 3 months later, I got a text from Maya. I want a divorce. Jake's a nightmare and everyone treats us like pariahs. Please help me. I'll pay back the money. I screenshotted it and posted it on social media with the caption, "Some people never learn. P.S. What money? I never gave you any money." The comments were brutal. People who'd watched the wedding video had shared it with their friends, and it had gone viral beyond our local community. Maya and Jake had become internet famous as the worst people ever and proof that karma is real. A year later, Maya and Jake were still married, not because they wanted to be, but because neither could afford a divorce lawyer. Their reputations were ruined, their careers destroyed. They'd moved to 3 different states, but Derek's video followed them wherever they went. Social media algorithms made sure that anyone who searched their names found the wedding footage. Maya had to change her name legally and was working as a cashier at a gas station in Wyoming. Jake was washing dishes at a truck stop diner, his dreams of owning a restaurant permanently destroyed. Every time they tried to start over, someone would recognize them from the video. I, meanwhile, had used the year to travel, start my own nursing consulting business, and rediscover who I was without Jake's dead weight holding me back. The money I'd saved for his restaurant became the seed funding for my own company, helping hospitals improve their patient care protocols. Last month, I got engaged to Derek, the cousin who'd helped orchestrate the perfect revenge. He understood loyalty, creativity, and the importance of standing up for yourself. Our relationship had grown naturally from friendship to something deeper as we worked together to rebuild my life. You know I fell in love with you during the planning phase, he told me when he proposed. Watching you take control of your life like that, it was the sexiest thing I'd ever seen. Maya sent a bitter congratulations card to my parents' house. Hope your marriage lasts longer than your capacity for forgiveness. I sent back a simple reply. It will. I finally learned to choose people who choose me first. The wedding is next spring. Maya and Jake aren't invited, but I'm sure they'll find a way to watch the video online. After all, Derek's already promised to livestream the whole thing with the hashtag #SureRealLove. The guest list includes everyone who was at the first wedding. They're all eager to celebrate an actual love story this time. Mrs. Patterson will be walking me down the aisle since my father passed away last fall. Even Jake's college friends are coming, bringing their wives who want to meet the woman who exposed those cheaters. The best part? Every vendor from the original wedding has offered their services for free. The photographer, the florist, the caterer. They all want to be part of a real celebration after being unwitting participants in Maya and Jake's deception. This time, the cake designer told me. We're making something sweet enough to wash away the bitter taste of last year's disaster. I couldn't agree more. My uncle tried to have me declared mentally incompetent for my inheritance, so I played along until the court date. When my grandmother died and left me her entire estate, worth $2.3 million, I knew Uncle Garrett would lose his mind. He'd been circling like a vulture for years, waiting for his payday. What he didn't expect was Grandma's final screw you from beyond the grave. The will reading was brutal. Garrett sat there, jaw clenched, as the lawyer read how I'd inherit everything on my 25th birthday, just 6 months away. The house, the investments, even Grandma's antique jewelry collection. Garrett got nothing except a vintage tea set and a note that said, "For all your fake concern over the years." His face went through about 17 different emotions before settling on rage. "This is ridiculous," he stammered to the lawyer. "Vivian's barely functional. She dropped out of law school, lives like a hermit, and can't even hold a job." The lawyer, Mr. Henderson, adjusted his glasses. "The will is ironclad, Mr. Walsh. Your mother was of sound mind when she drafted it." Garrett's wife, Cheryl, my step-aunt, who'd married him for his expected inheritance, looked like she might vomit. She'd already picked out new furniture for the lake house, planned renovations for the main estate, and researched European cruises they'd take with their money. I'd overheard her on the phone with interior designers just 2 weeks earlier, discussing a complete makeover that would cost more than most people make in a year. "There has to be something we can do," Cheryl whispered, gripping Garrett's arm so tight her knuckles went white. "Oh, there is," Garrett said, his voice cold. "Trust me." The thing about Garrett was that he'd always been a schemer. Even as kids, he'd find ways to manipulate situations to his advantage. When we were young, he'd convince other relatives that Grandma was showing favoritism toward me, hoping they'd pressure her to be fair and include him more in her will. He'd bring her gifts he couldn't afford, then complain loudly about his financial struggles, hoping she'd offer to help. But Grandma saw right through him. She'd told me stories about how he'd tried to convince her to invest in his various failed business ventures over the years. A restaurant that closed within 6 months. A real estate flip that lost money when the market crashed. A pyramid scheme involving essential oils that got him investigated by the state attorney general. "Your uncle's problem," Grandma had explained while we baked cookies the Christmas before she died, "is that he thinks everyone else is as stupid as he is. He's been trying to manipulate me for 30 years, and he still hasn't figured out that I see right through him." 2 weeks later, the legal papers arrived. Garrett was petitioning the court to have me declared mentally incompetent, claiming I was unstable and unfit to manage significant assets. His evidence? That I'd dropped out of law school after a nervous breakdown, lived alone with too many cats. I had two, exhibited erratic behavior patterns, and had been increasingly isolated and paranoid since my grandmother's death. The petition was thorough. He'd documented every time I'd canceled plans, every occasion I'd seemed distracted at family gatherings, every moment I'd appeared anything less than perfectly composed. He'd even gotten statements from neighbors claiming I talked to myself and kept strange hours. Mrs. Henderson from next door had signed an affidavit saying she'd seen me having animated conversations with invisible people in my backyard. What she'd actually witnessed was me talking to my cats while gardening, but Garrett had coached her to make it sound ominous. The hearing was scheduled for 3 months out, plenty of time for me to gather evidence of my own. What Garrett didn't know was that Grandma had warned me this would happen. During her final week, when the morphine made her lucid in unexpected moments, she'd gripped my hand with surprising strength. "Your uncle's a snake," she'd whispered, her voice barely audible. "He's been asking about my will for months, trying to find ways to contest it. He even brought some lawyer friend by last month, claiming it was just a social visit, but I heard them talking on the porch about undue influence and mental capacity evaluations. She'd made me promise to fight for what was rightfully mine. Don't let him win," she'd said. "That money is meant to give you freedom, not line his pockets. I've been saving it for 60 years so you could have choices I never had." I thought she was being paranoid. Turns out, even dying, Grandma was sharper than the rest of us. The day I received the incompetency petition, I sat in my kitchen reading every word. Garrett had been methodical. He documented times I'd seemed confused about dates, occasions when I'd appeared disheveled in public, instances where I'd made irrational purchases like organic cat food and art supplies. He'd even included a statement from my former law school advisor claiming I'd had an emotional breakdown during finals week. What had actually happened was that I'd cried in Professor Martinez's office after failing my corporate law exam, but Garrett had somehow tracked him down and convinced him to frame it as evidence of mental instability. That's when I realized something important. If Garrett wanted to see crazy, I'd give him a performance he'd never forget. But first, I needed to understand exactly what I was up against. I spent 3 days researching competency law, guardianship proceedings, and the specific requirements for having someone declared mentally incompetent. The more I learned, the more I realized how easily the system could be manipulated by someone with the right connections and enough malicious intent. I also started investigating Garrett himself. If he wanted to play dirty, I'd dig up every piece of dirt he'd ever buried. I started small with the performance. At family dinners, I'd stare blankly when spoken to, then suddenly laugh at nothing. I let my hair get greasy and wore the same clothes multiple days in a row. When Garrett visited to check on me, I'd leave dirty dishes everywhere and mutter about hearing voices. "The neighbors are watching me," I'd whisper, peeking through curtains with exaggerated paranoia. "They know about the money. They know Grandma told me secrets before she died." "What secrets, honey?" Garrett would ask, leaning forward with fake concern while his eyes gleamed with interest. "Can't tell," I'd mutter, shaking my head rapidly. "The walls have ears. Everything's recorded now. They're listening through the electrical outlets." I'd point at random spots on the wall, pretending to see cameras that weren't there. "Poor Vivian," he'd tell relatives afterward with perfectly practiced sympathy. "She's really deteriorating since Grandma died. The grief has just broken something in her mind. Yesterday she spent 2 hours talking to the mailbox, convinced it was sending messages to the government." But what Garrett didn't know was that I'd installed security cameras throughout the house the day after the will reading, hidden in picture frames, smoke detectors, even inside fake books on the shelves. I documented every conversation, every manipulative comment, every moment he thought he was alone and let his mask slip. The performance became elaborate. I'd accidentally burn food, leaving smoke alarms blaring when he visited. I'd answer the door in my bathrobe at 3 p.m., claiming I'd lost track of time and thought it was morning. I started collecting newspapers obsessively, stacking them in corners while muttering about important information and patterns only I could see. I bought 27 different conspiracy theory books and left them scattered around the house with highlighted passages about government surveillance and family betrayals. I set up a bulletin board covered in red string, connecting random photos, newspaper clippings, and handwritten notes that seemed delusional, but were actually grocery lists written in code. The grocery lists were my private joke. Milk, eggs, bread, destroy Uncle Garrett looked completely insane when written in my deliberately unstable handwriting and connected to photos of politicians with red string. Garrett ate it up. He brought friends by to witness my decline, shaking his head sadly as I rambled about conspiracy theories I'd researched online. He'd whisper loudly enough for me to overhear. "The doctors say it might be genetic. My mother had some paranoid episodes near the end, too." That was a lie. Grandma had been sharp until her final breath, sharp enough to hide a recording device in her bedside table during Garrett's last visit. I'd found the recording after her death, where she'd caught him rifling through her jewelry box while she pretended to sleep. I escalated the performance. I started answering my phone with Vivian's House of Secrets were being monitored, and hanging up on telemarketers after warning them about the listeners. I wore the same stained sweater for a week straight and shuffled around in fuzzy slippers, even when Garrett brought his lawyer by for an informal visit. "How long has she been like this?" the lawyer asked, watching me arrange cat toys in geometric patterns while humming off-key. "It started right after the funeral," Garrett said sadly. "She became obsessed with the idea that people were plotting against her. Last week, she tried to pay for groceries with Monopoly money and genuinely seemed confused when the cashier explained the difference." That last part was true. I'd practiced looking genuinely bewildered when confronted with the concept of real currency versus board game money. The acting exercise had been surprisingly therapeutic, and the cashier had been so concerned she'd called the store manager to help the confused young lady. I could see the lawyer mentally calculating how easy this case would be. A clearly delusional young woman with documented erratic behavior up against a concerned family member just trying to protect her? It would be a slam dunk, if only they knew about the cameras capturing every word. During this time, I was also building my real case. I hired a private investigator named Ruby Chen, a former police detective who specialized in family financial disputes. Ruby was recommended by one of my law school professors who'd stayed in touch after I dropped out. "Your uncle's got this whole thing planned out," Ruby explained during our first meeting at a coffee shop across town. "I've been looking into his finances, and the man's desperate. He owes money to contractors, gambling buddies, even the IRS. Without that inheritance, he's looking at bankruptcy within 6 months." Ruby had already discovered that Garrett had been stealing from Grandma before she died. Small amounts from her checking account, jewelry pieces he claimed she'd given him, even a forged signature on a loan document 6 months before her death where he'd borrowed against her house without her knowledge. "The interesting thing," Ruby continued, spreading documents across the table, "is that your grandmother seems to have known about the theft. She kept detailed records of everything that went missing, complete with dates and descriptions. She even had her jewelry appraised and photographed before some of his visits. This was news to me. Grandma had been building her own case against Garrett. "There's more," Ruby said. "Your uncle's been telling people for years that your grandmother promised him the inheritance. I've got recorded conversations where he's bragging about how he'll be set for life once the old lady dies. He even pre-ordered a boat last month, telling the dealer he'd have the money soon. The boat was a 30-foot cabin cruiser that cost more than most people's houses. Garrett had apparently put down a $50,000 deposit and told the dealer his inheritance would come through any day now. Ruby also discovered that Garrett had approached several other family members, trying to get them to support his competency claim. He'd offered my cousin Derek $10,000 to testify that I'd seemed unstable at Christmas dinner. Derek had recorded the conversation and sent it to Ruby. "Your uncle's not just greedy," Ruby explained. "He's sloppy. He's leaving evidence everywhere because he's so confident this will work." The real breakthrough came when Garrett brought Dr. Morrison to examine me, a psychiatrist who apparently owed Garrett money from their weekly poker games. Ruby had discovered this connection through her police contacts. "Morrison's got gambling debts up to his eyeballs," Ruby had explained. "Your uncle's been floating him loans for months, and the good doctor's license is already under review for some questionable diagnostic practices in other cases." For Dr. Morrison's visit, I prepared my masterpiece performance. I spent hours researching the symptoms of various mental health conditions, not to mock them, but to create a convincing portrayal that would fool a corrupt psychiatrist who wasn't paying attention. I pretended to have a complete breakdown during the evaluation, sobbing about imaginary threats and claiming the walls were listening to our conversation. I refused to make eye contact, rocked back and forth in my chair, and insisted that my cats were the only ones I could trust because they couldn't be bought or corrupted. "The government put chips in everyone's phones," I whispered, glancing around frantically. "But cats don't have phones. That's why they're safe. That's why I need so many of them. They're the only witnesses I can trust." I only had 2 cats, but I'd been buying cat supplies in bulk to support my crazy cat lady image. My basement was stocked with enough cat food to supply a shelter, and I'd set up multiple litter boxes throughout the house to make it look like I was hoarding animals. Dr. Morrison barely looked up from his notepad as he scribbled his predetermined diagnosis. The whole evaluation lasted maybe 20 minutes, and he spent most of it checking his phone and making notes that had nothing to do with my behavior. "Do you hear voices that other people can't hear?" he asked in a bored tone. "Only the cats," I replied, then started having a full conversation with my tabby, Mr. Whiskers, about the doctor's suspicious motives. "You see it too, don't you? The way he's not really listening? He's already decided what to write." Morrison didn't even react to this obviously staged behavior. He just scribbled more notes and asked perfunctory questions about my sleep patterns and appetite. "Severe paranoid delusions with possible schizophrenic episodes," he told Garrett afterward, thinking I was upstairs napping. "She's clearly unable to distinguish reality from fantasy. The cat obsession is particularly concerning, classic sign of isolation-induced psychosis. She'll never be competent to handle that inheritance. I'll make sure the court sees that." "How much will your testimony cost?" Garrett asked bluntly. "Consider my poker debt forgiven, and we're even," Morrison replied. "Plus my usual expert witness fee, of course. Gotta make it look legitimate." They laughed like old friends sharing a joke. I recorded everything from the air vent above the kitchen, where I'd installed one of my best cameras. Meanwhile, Ruby was uncovering more evidence of Garrett's desperation and criminal behavior. We discovered he'd been living off credit for the past 5 years, using one credit card to pay another in an endless cycle that was about to collapse. "Your uncle's been telling creditors that he's expecting a large inheritance," Ruby explained during one of our weekly updates. "He's used that story to get extensions on loans, advance payments from contractors, even convinced his mortgage company to defer payments for 6 months. The web of lies was staggering. Garrett had promised the same inheritance money to a dozen different creditors. When the will reading revealed he wasn't getting anything, his entire financial house of cards would collapse. "There's something else," Ruby said, pulling out another folder. "I found evidence that your uncle tried the same scam with his grandfather 15 years ago. Different circumstances, but the same basic approach. Claim the heir is mentally incompetent, get yourself appointed guardian, control the money." The grandfather case had failed because other family members had intervened, but it showed that Garrett's current scheme wasn't a desperate last-minute idea. It was a calculated pattern. 3 weeks before the hearing, I made contact with Garrett's ex-wife, Rita. She'd been bitter about their divorce for 15 years, especially since Garrett had hidden assets during the proceedings and left her with almost nothing. "He's trying to steal your inheritance?" Rita laughed harshly over coffee at a diner downtown. "That sounds exactly like him. The man thinks he's entitled to everything that isn't nailed down. During our marriage, he tried to convince my elderly aunt to change her will and leave him her house. When that didn't work, he actually suggested we contest it after she died." I explained my plan. Rita's eyes lit up with vindictive joy that was almost frightening. "I've been waiting years to watch that man get what he deserves," she said. "Count me in. I've got boxes of evidence about his financial manipulations." Rita had saved every piece of documentation from their marriage, including evidence of Garrett's previous attempts to manipulate elderly relatives. His own grandfather had changed his will 3 times after Garrett's visits, each time giving him less money as he caught on to his grandson's schemes. Garrett tried the same thing with my grandmother, Rita explained, pulling out a folder thick with documents. He'd visit her when she was sick, bringing flowers and fake sympathy, then suggest she update her will to make things easier for the family. When she refused, he started spreading rumors about her mental state, claiming she was getting confused and might be taken advantage of by unscrupulous relatives. She showed me bank records proving Garrett had forged checks from his grandfather's account, medical records that contradicted his claims about the old man's mental state, and even a confession letter he'd written during their divorce, where he admitted to various financial schemes. The best part, Rita said with a vindictive smile, is that I recorded most of our arguments during the divorce. He admitted to all kinds of stuff when he was angry, thinking I'd never use it against him. The recordings were devastating. Hours of Garrett admitting to forgery, manipulation, and outright theft from elderly relatives. In one particularly damaging conversation, he bragged about how easy it was to convince doctors to question someone's mental capacity if you presented the right evidence. 3 days before the hearing, I made my final preparations. I cleaned myself up, organized all my evidence into a presentation that would make my law school professors proud, and called the one person Garrett would never suspect, his current wife, Cheryl. I know you think I'm crazy, I told her over the phone, letting my voice shake convincingly. But I found something in Grandma's papers about Garrett. I'm scared to tell anyone else, but I think you should know. Cheryl arrived within an hour, looking nervous and suspicious. Over the past months, I'd noticed cracks in their marriage. Garrett's financial stress was showing, and he'd been taking it out on her with increasing frequency. I showed her fabricated documents suggesting Garrett had been planning to leave her once he got the inheritance. Bank statements showing secret accounts, printed emails about new starts and freedom from dead weight, even a fake receipt for a consultation with a divorce attorney. The documents were completely fake, created by Ruby's tech-savvy nephew, but Cheryl's reaction was real. Years of suspicion about Garrett's faithfulness came flooding out. That bastard, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I knew something was wrong. He's been so secretive lately, taking phone calls in the garage, staying out late for business meetings that don't exist. She told me about finding credit card bills for expensive restaurants where he'd taken clients she'd never heard of, hotel receipts for overnight trips that didn't match his supposed work schedule, and mysterious cash withdrawals from their joint account. I comforted her while secretly recording our conversation. By the time she left, Cheryl had agreed to testify about Garrett's financial desperation and his comments about doing whatever it takes to get Grandma's money. He said your grandmother was a selfish old bat for not leaving him anything, Cheryl admitted. He said she'd lost her mind and didn't understand what family meant. He even joked about having her declared incompetent before she died, but said it was too late because she'd already made the will. This was perfect evidence of premeditation. There's something else, Cheryl continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. Last week, he brought home some medical forms and asked me to sign them as a witness. He said they were just routine paperwork, but when I looked closer, they were requests for your medical records from various doctors. He forged your signature on the authorization forms. This was a federal crime. Garrett had committed medical privacy violations to build his case against me. The morning of the court date, I walked into that courtroom looking like a completely different person. Clean, composed, wearing a sharp business suit I'd hidden in my closet for months. My hair was professionally styled, my makeup perfect. I looked every inch the competent law school graduate I actually was. Garrett's face went white when he saw me. He leaned over to whisper frantically to his lawyer, who looked equally confused. What happened to her? I heard him hiss. She was completely out of it yesterday. His lawyer, a sleazy-looking man named Patterson who specialized in questionable guardianship cases, tried to recover quickly. Sometimes people with mental illness can have moments of clarity, he whispered back. It doesn't change the underlying pathology. But I could see the doubt creeping into his eyes. The hearing began with Patterson presenting Garrett's case. He called several witnesses who testified to my supposed erratic behavior over the past months. Mrs. Henderson from next door repeated her story about the animated conversations with invisible people. Dr. Morrison gave his rehearsed testimony about paranoid delusions and cognitive decline. The subject exhibits classic signs of paranoid schizophrenia, Morrison told the judge confidently. She's unable to distinguish reality from fantasy and poses a danger to herself if left unsupervised. Her obsession with cats is particularly concerning, as is her belief that she's being monitored by government agencies. He presented his notes from our session, complete with fabricated quotes and exaggerated symptoms. In my professional opinion, Morrison concluded, Ms. Walsh is wholly incompetent to manage her own affairs, let alone a significant inheritance. She requires immediate guardianship and potentially long-term institutional care. The judge, an elderly man named Harrison, who'd been on the bench for 30 years, listened carefully to each witness. I could see him taking notes, occasionally glancing at me with what looked like concern. Then it was my turn. I stood up, walked to the judge's bench with perfect posture, and handed over a flash drive containing everything I'd gathered. Your Honor, I'd like to present evidence that this entire petition is fraudulent. The courtroom erupted. Garrett jumped to his feet, but his lawyer pulled him back down with a sharp yank. Objection! Patterson shouted. This is highly irregular! Overruled, Judge Harrison said calmly. I'm curious to hear what the respondent has to say. Please proceed, Ms. Walsh. I had prepared a presentation that laid out Garrett's scheme methodically. First, I played the recording of Garrett and Dr. Morrison's deal. The judge's expression darkened as he heard them discussing falsified testimony and debt forgiveness. This is fabricated, Garrett shouted. She's making this up. Mr. Walsh, the judge said coldly, you'll have your chance to respond. Sit down. Next came the financial records showing Garrett's desperation and theft from Grandma's accounts. Ruby had done beautiful work documenting every fraudulent transaction, every forged signature, every lie he'd told to cover his tracks. I showed evidence of the boat deposit, the promises to creditors, the hidden credit card debt, even his attempts to manipulate other family members into supporting his case. Your Honor, I said, my uncle isn't trying to protect me from financial mismanagement. He's trying to steal my inheritance to pay off his own debts and fund a lifestyle he can't afford. Then I called my witnesses. Ruby took the stand first, presenting her investigation findings with the precision of a seasoned detective. She walked the judge through Garrett's financial history, his pattern of manipulation, and the evidence of his theft from Grandma's accounts. In my professional opinion, Ruby testified, Mr. Walsh orchestrated this entire competency proceeding as a way to gain control of assets that don't belong to him. His financial desperation provides clear motive, and his history shows a pattern of attempting to manipulate elderly relatives for financial gain. Then Rita took the stand. Your Honor, she said, her voice steady with years of suppressed rage, my ex-husband has a pattern of manipulating elderly relatives for financial gain. I have documentation going back 20 years. She presented the evidence methodically. The forged checks from his grandfather, the manipulated will changes, the recorded conversations where Garrett admitted to his schemes. She played excerpts from their divorce arguments where Garrett bragged about his manipulation tactics. He told me once that elderly people were easy marks because they were lonely and wanted to believe family members cared about them, Rita testified. He said all you had to do was visit regularly, bring gifts, and then start suggesting changes to their financial arrangements for their own good. But the final blow was Cheryl. Your Honor, she said, her voice shaking with rage and betrayal. My husband told me exactly what he planned to do. He said, that little bitch doesn't deserve Grandma's money. I'll have her locked up in a mental hospital if I have to. Once she's declared incompetent, I'll be appointed guardian and the money will be as good as mine. She testified about the forged medical record requests, the secret debts, and Garrett's increasingly desperate behavior as his financial situation deteriorated. He's been lying to everyone, Cheryl continued. He told me we were financially secure, but I found out last week that he's been using our joint credit cards to make minimum payments on debts I didn't even know existed. We're facing foreclosure, and he saw Vivian's inheritance as his only way out. Garrett stood up, screaming, She's lying, you're all lying, this is a conspiracy. The judge banged his gavel hard. Mr. Walsh, sit down immediately or I'll hold you in contempt. But Garrett was beyond reason. 20 years of careful planning crumbled in 20 minutes. He lunged toward me, yelling about how I'd stolen his inheritance, how Grandma had been poisoned against him, how I was too stupid and crazy to handle real money. I worked for this, he screamed as court security moved toward him. I visited that old bat every week, listened to her boring stories, pretended to care about her stupid cats. That money should be mine. His mask had completely slipped. The caring, concerned uncle was gone, replaced by the true Garrett, greedy, entitled, and vicious. Court security restrained him as he continued his rant, proving more effectively than any testimony that he was the unstable one. She's not even family, Garrett shrieked as they dragged him toward the door. She's just some brat my mother favored because she felt guilty about how my father treated me. I'm her real son. I deserve everything she had. The judge dismissed the petition immediately and ordered an investigation into Dr. Morrison's medical license. He also referred Garrett's theft charges to the district attorney. Mr. Walsh, the judge said as they prepared to lead him away. I've seen many frivolous lawsuits in my courtroom, but this level of fraud and manipulation is particularly disturbing. You attempted to have your own niece committed to a mental institution for financial gain. That's not just illegal, it's unconscionable. As they led Garrett away in handcuffs, he looked back at me with pure hatred. You think you've won? He snarled. This isn't over. Family doesn't forget Vivian. You'll get what's coming to you. But it was over. 3 months later, Garrett was convicted of elder abuse, fraud, attempted manipulation of court proceedings, and medical privacy violations. He got 5 years in state prison. Dr. Morrison lost his license and faced perjury charges. His gambling debts were exposed, and several other suspicious cases he'd been involved in were reopened for investigation. Cheryl divorced Garrett immediately and took half of what little he had left, which wasn't much after his legal fees and restitution payments. She also testified against him in the criminal trial, providing additional evidence of his schemes and manipulations. I inherited Grandma's estate on my 25th birthday, exactly as she intended. The first thing I did was establish a foundation to help elderly people protect themselves from financial abuse by family members. Ruby became the foundation's head investigator, and we've helped dozens of families avoid situations like mine. The second thing I did was change the locks on every property and install a state-of-the-art security system. The cameras I'd used to catch Garrett were replaced with professional-grade equipment, because I'd learned that predators rarely work alone. I also went back to law school, using some of the inheritance to pay for my education. My experience with Garrett had taught me more about the legal system than any textbook could, and I wanted to use that knowledge to help others. Because I learned something important during those 3 months of pretending to be crazy. The line between acting unstable and actually becoming unstable is thinner than you think. Some nights, alone in that big house with all my fake symptoms, I almost forgot I was performing. The isolation, the constant vigilance, the paranoia, even when it's manufactured, takes a toll. I started seeing a real therapist, Dr. Williams, who helped me process the trauma of growing up with a predatory family member and the stress of the legal battle. She helped me understand that what I'd experienced wasn't just financial abuse, it was psychological warfare. Your uncle didn't just want your money, Dr. Williams explained during one of our sessions. He wanted to break you psychologically, making you doubt your own sanity, isolating you from support systems, convincing others that you were unstable. These are classic tactics of psychological abuse. But I also learned that sometimes the best way to expose someone's true nature is to give them exactly what they think they want. Garrett thought he wanted a crazy, incompetent niece he could manipulate. Instead, he got a law school dropout who'd learned more about legal strategy in 3 months than he'd absorbed in 60 years of scheming. The foundation has helped 43 families so far, and we're expanding our services every year. Each case reminds me why Grandma's final gift wasn't just money. It was the chance to protect others from predators like Garrett. We've caught embezzling caregivers, manipulative stepchildren, and corrupt lawyers who prey on elderly clients. We've helped families recognize the warning signs of financial abuse and take action before it's too late. The house is peaceful now. My cats, both of them, spend their days sunbathing in Grandma's garden, where she taught me to recognize the difference between flowers and weeds. And every evening, I sit on the porch where she used to rock, watching the sunset over the lake that Garrett will never see again as a free man. Last month, I got another letter from Garrett in prison. This was his 4th attempt to contact me since his conviction. He wanted to apologize, to make amends, to be family again. He claimed he'd found God and realized the error of his ways. I threw it away without reading past the first line, just like I had with the others. Some people don't deserve second chances, especially when they never deserved the first one. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's getting everything they thought they could take from you, then using it to make sure they can never hurt anyone else the same way. The foundation has helped 43 families so far. Each case reminds me why Grandma's final gift wasn't just money. It was the chance to protect others from predators like Garrett. And every time we catch another financial manipulator, every time we save someone's inheritance from a greedy relative, I can almost hear Grandma's voice. That's my girl. Now you're using that brain for something worthwhile. Last week we had our biggest victory yet. A case involving a 90-year-old woman whose son had been systematically draining her accounts for years. We caught him trying to have her declared incompetent so he could sell her house and move her into a nursing home where she'd have no oversight of her finances. The son's scheme was almost identical to Garrett's, down to the corrupt doctor willing to provide false testimony. But this time, we were ready for him. Ruby had trained our team to recognize the patterns, document the evidence, and build airtight cases that courts couldn't ignore. We saved that woman's house, her independence, and over $800,000 that her son had planned to steal. After the hearing, the woman hugged me with tears in her eyes. "Thank you for believing me," she whispered. "No one else would listen." That's when I knew Grandma would be proud. Her money wasn't just securing my future. It was protecting families from the kind of predator who had tried to destroy us both. The irony isn't lost on me. Garrett spent years trying to convince people I was mentally incompetent, but his actions proved he was the one who couldn't distinguish right from wrong, reality from fantasy, or love from greed. Now, 3 years later, I'm a practicing attorney specializing in elder law and family financial abuse. I have a successful practice, a beautiful home, and the satisfaction of knowing that Garrett's scheme not only failed, it led to a career that's the exact opposite of everything he represents. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's getting everything they thought they could take from you, then using it to make the world a little bit safer from people like them.